Call to order this meeting of the Fiscal Committee of the Sioux Falls City Council. Today's Tuesday, June 7th, and wow, the crowd is amazing tonight here at Carnegie Town Hall. There is standing room only, I'm telling you, folks. Now, it's great to start a new season with the City Council. This is a new version of the Fiscal Committee, a couple new members, new chair, obviously, and it's always fun to kind of start seeing how that next year of council is going to go. And so I really wanted to talk a little bit today about what the Fiscal Committee is and where we might be headed with it. So we'll start tonight with our approval of the minutes. This is from the last meeting was October 6th, 2015. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Second item then on the agenda is really just a conversation about goals and topics for the Fiscal Committee. One of the things that struck me, first of all, is the previous chair of the Fiscal Committee, Councilor Jameson, kind of gave us a farewell, and as he did, he talked about that 25% reserve requirement that was established by the Sioux Falls City Council many years ago, 10, 12 years ago or so. And he talked about why we do that and what's the history of it. And I think one of the things that has always concerned me as an elected official is that we be careful that we understand our history so that if, you know, that we're not prone to repeat things that we shouldn't be repeating. And so I took that leadership from Councilor Jameson, and we have invited, Dave Bixler has invited Tracy Turbeck to be here with us during our July meeting of the Fiscal Committee. Mr. Turbeck, the Director of Finance, will talk about that 25% reserve, kind of make some comparisons. Why do we do it as a Sioux Falls City Council, and how does that compare to other communities, and what might be our expectations for that? Councilor Rolfing.
I would like to, am I on? Yeah. Suggest that we, we have it for our operating and for our, what's the other one, Dave, operating, the 25 Capital. And the 11? Capital. No, it's not either capital, it's something else. But I would like to see.
Would you come up?
Dave Bixler, Budget Analyst for the City Council. We have a 25% year-end reserve balance, unapplied or unobligated fund balance for the general fund. And then also on a monthly basis, we have 11% unrestricted cash balance.
Right.
Oh.
Those are the reserve targets.
A little bit different, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I would like to look also, and I had talked to Councilor Jameson about this, about a same kind of a guideline, if you will, for our debt load as compared to our gross income or our CIP income or whatever it would be. Okay. So that we know when we've said as a council, that's as far as we're going. We're not, it's going to take special dispensation from somebody to have us go over this amount, but up until this point, I think we can not freely, but we can look at it and not be afraid to take on a little bit more debt. I think that would be something that we could look at also.
I think that's a great idea. Comments from other council members, comments or questions about that idea in terms of discussing debt limit? I'm seeing Ned, heads nod. Certainly, there are sort of guidelines now, but we don't have anything codified that says we're not going to go over this much, this percentage of our income.
Right, right, and I think that we should probably have something like that so that, when a building or a swimming pool or a event center or whatever it is, doesn't make any difference. If we're getting up to that level, then we need to take that into consideration.
Right, Mr. Bixler.
I would suggest or offer up that there are different uses of debt as far as the enterprise funds, sales and use tax for the capital second penny. So I think you'd have to kind of divvy those out.
I would agree with you. We need to look at the enterprise funds as one area, and the CIP as another, and can we do something from the operating? We can borrow money from the operating fund too, I would imagine. That would allow us to do some things depending on what it would be for. I have no idea what that would be, but I would imagine we could if we had to.
Mr. Bixler.
And so.
I'm not sure exactly where you're driving at there.
I'm just saying there would be maybe three different percentages or three different formulas, whatever you want to call it, that says, you know, if in operating, in capital, and in enterprise, anytime you go above, or anytime you're thinking about going above this line, we're going to have to do something special to approve it.
Well, for example, you could say with the second penny, the debt service can only be a certain percentage of the total
Amount.
total
Yep.
expense.
Exactly, that's what I'm talking about. And so I don't know exactly how best to handle that, and perhaps that is something that we should hand over to Mr. Bixler. But I know he's getting into some busy time, but maybe that could be done before all the budget stuff happens too, and come back to this group with some recommendations.
Well, I think it's important to understand that, you know, the fiscal committee is one of several committees of the city council, and whenever people ask me what the city council does, I always say it's policy and purse strings, right? The other committees that we have tend to deal with policy mostly. This committee is the one that is most focused on the purse strings. There is no reason why we can't have this conversation and why we wouldn't just bring it forward as a committee, as long as I'm seeing from the committee that you're willing to have this conversation about putting sort of considering putting a limit on what our debt ratio might be. I'm getting nods on this side. Councilor Erickson, I'm getting nods on this side. I think that this committee is saying, the will of the committee is, let's push this forward as a conversation to come out of the fiscal committee. Mr. Bixler, if you would add that to your list. I acknowledge what Councilor Rolfing is saying, that this is a busy time for you coming into summer, budget time, but to make it one of those things that you and I work on the agenda together, and when you have sort of a rough presentation ready, let's have a conversation about when we put it on the next agenda.
Okay, I can initiate the process.
Okay. It's my intention that this group will meet every month, except for that month that we cancel because of budget meetings. I really, you know, as you look, we just approved minutes from October of 2015. I don't expect this committee to do that again. So, Councilor Erickson.
Just a question for David Bixler, excuse me. Do we already have something like that in effect? Doesn't federal government say that you can only spend so much? I thought I've heard Tracy saying something along the lines that you can only spend so much based on your, I don't know the correct terminology, but I thought there was something in place.
There is. It is called the legal debt limit, and it's based on the value of the property within your municipality, and we're nowhere near that limit.
Right. That would be, I mean, just to know what that is, the exact number is for that, and then say, we don't want to be anywhere near that. Our goal is to be at this magic number because this is what this council feels is appropriate, and we feel comfortable and we feel safe knowing that we've got this much in reserve, save for a rainy day, unforeseen projects, whatever it may be, but just to keep that number in line with it as well.
And another part of the scenario or the arrangement would be that you're going to have debt that's going to be expiring over time. So you're going to also want to take that into consideration as well.
Right.
And so we'll incorporate that into the process.
No, I think that's right. And I think you're on the right track, Councilor Erickson, that idea that I remember when the council did set that 25% limit for unreserved or unobligated funds, the reserve funds. And it wasn't that there weren't already sort of guidelines for it. It was that they just wanted, we're setting a safe level. And there's no reason why this council can't do the same thing with debt. So, good. Great conversation. Councilor
Madam
Erickson.
Chair?
Yes. Mr.
One of the
Sharp.
things that I'd like to see us do with this group is maybe a couple of key financial indicators or something as part of a dashboard that we could say the city's in a good financial spot, maybe that we could identify what those are. You know, debt is obviously one of those things, but are we, you know, maybe there's 4 or 5 things. I do it in my business. There's things that I look at each month and I know that I'm in good shape to meet my quota or to meet my revenue projections for the year, to meet my budget. And maybe there is something that some way we could put those 4 or 5 indicators together. You know, it obviously has to do with the amount of income that we have. whether our sales tax numbers are matching where we're at. Something that's a one-page thing where as a counselor and as a citizen that you can say, all right, this is, you know, we are at where we should be, or we're not, you know, do we need to take some steps? Some things that boil it down so that it's an easy conversation to have with a citizen, or even myself, that says, you know, we're where we need to be with sales tax. We're ahead, we're behind. I mean, that's obviously one of them, but maybe it's a way to compile it each month or each quarter to do that. I think that would be a good task for this group.
Good, thank you, Councilor. Councilor Rolfing?
Counselor Starr, I think we already received that. Whether or not you've seen it or not is another story. We do get a financial report every month from Tracy Turbeck that has employment or unemployment, tax revenue, spending, housing, and a number of other indicators of what the economy. One of the things that I always look at is entertainment tax collection, because that tells me that people are spending money and have some discretionary income. So we have that. And so you'll get used to seeing that on a monthly basis and be able to pick out the parts that you like and that you want to see. However, I would like to acknowledge, if I could, that a note I received from Finance Department the other day indicated that they were going to try to give us on email the monthly reports and then quarterly come into the informational meetings for a verbal. I maybe overstepped my bounds, but I wrote back to them right away and indicated that I don't think we want to not have a meeting or a presentation on a monthly basis of where we are financially because of questions we might want to ask, and it opens it up to the public, et cetera. So hopefully I have taken that, and they know that we want a monthly report. I know they're trying to do maybe something a little more similar to what you're looking at, a dashboard, give us something a little less, you know, paperish, okay. And that'll be great. But I did indicate right away that we need to have that monthly report on a personal basis.
Councilor Starr, response?
No, I was agreeing. I totally agree. Quarterly, we get way too far behind in being able to ask those questions, and then we gloss over it. And that's definitely a thing monthly that we need to, as a council, be taking a look at.
So then the next question, this begs the next question then, does this group want to look at that even deeper? Do we want, I mean, they're doing the presentation to an informational meeting. Does this group want to look at it even farther with the help of our budget analyst? I mean, is that a monthly report that this group wants?
I would, if I could.
Mm-hmm. Yes, go ahead, Councilor.
I would suggest that we wait and see what the Finance Department comes up with, and then ask Mr. Bixler to look it over and see if there's something he felt that should be on there, and we can identify the things that we really want to see on there, which either they have on there or don't. They could add or subtract as we go along. I think that would make sense. Let's not try to reinvent the wheel at this point. Let them come up with what they're come up with.
Okay. Other thoughts or comments on this general topic of kind of limits on debt, limits on, or looking at financial reports? Then I would just kind of open it up to open conversation. I did, in the red notes, kind of toss out the idea that kind of want to look at some goals, kind of want to look at what kinds of things does a fiscal committee, this fiscal committee, want to be a part of. I do have a couple of ideas I want to toss out, but if there are things from the committee, Councilor Erickson.
I have two that I would bring up, and one just very general is entertainment dollars. I think that we have to keep a close watch on those. Not a watch, so to speak, but I think that just having that extra information of what, just a refresher, what it can be used for, where they are, where it's going up, just so we have a say in where those dollars are being spent as well, I think is important. And so entertainment dollars, tax dollars would be key for me, as well as the other item. Oh, it just slipped my mind. Come back to me.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
I'll come back to you. Yep.
Good, it's not just me.
It's my mom brain.
Oh.
Contagious sometimes. Councilor Starr, anything from you? Suggestions, requests?
I think at this point we're kind of heading in the right direction.
Okay.
They're there, so.
And obviously, it's an ongoing conversation. It's going to be something I'm going to ask us every month, but I wanted to have our first meeting be just kind of, let's spew what we've got going. Counselor Erickson, bring it back.
It came back. I got to write it down or I'll forget. The one thing that I think would be helpful, and this, I don't know if it's maybe for this committee or if it comes out of this committee, is knowing the financial impact. Oftentimes we're told, for example, today during the flood zone map thing is there's $0 in fees and they want to do $50. What are we talking about for a dollar amount? And I don't know if it's the administration that brings that forward, or I don't know if it's Mr. Bixler bringing it forward in the red notes for us, but having that financial impact, anytime there's an increase or a decrease, what is that going to do to our budget? What does that do? I mean, it might just be a couple $1,000, but even if we're talking about the transit, or if we're talking about the flood zone stuff now, or raising the dollar amount for the signs, recently we did that as well. That was another issue. And so having the financial impact anytime a fee is increased or decreased, I think, is just to have that little snidbit dollar amount. But I'm not sure if it comes from our staff or the staff that's presenting it. I don't know, just throwing it out there for discussion.
No, I think it's a great idea. Just a comment, and Councilor Rolfe maybe remind me, or Mr. Bixler remind me, there is a financial impact statement in our budget books for each item. You can trace it that way, but Mr. Bixler, could you talk to us about what Councilor Erickson is talking about in terms of sort of week-to-week analysis, if you will? We're going to raise, I don't know, rates on whatever. I can't even think of anything that won't get quoted in the press, but think of how could we portray financial impact?
Well, I think we could, there's a variety of things we could look at. One, I think that's going to be prominent very soon is going to be the new indoor pool and the operations for that. And I believe that they have that annual operating cost of $750,000, I believe. But we could be looking at some of those types of things and maybe discussing those a little bit further. Mm-hmm. But a majority of the initiatives that come through, and they come through on your consent agenda, have already been approved through the appropriation process. And then you're again consent or providing consent to those items again as they come through. And so I think that's maybe something that we could also focus in on more too, is the consent agenda contracts.
Because, I mean, I don't know about other counselors, but I have the stack of books from last summer, right? And I go back to them now and then, but not as often as maybe I should. Maybe that's part of your weekly work, is that you go through and cross-reference, you know, when you appropriated this in September of 2015, this is what it meant at that time, and just as a reminder. Is that maybe something that's workable along that line? Let's think about it, let's talk about it.
Sure.
Give it a shot, you know, see if that's maybe something that could be part of your thought process every week. I know you have lots on your plate, but.
You can use next weekend to get it done.
He's so helpful, isn't he?
I want
Yes,
to echo part of what Councilor Erickson was saying, though. Do we need to raise fees? Do we need, you know, is this when I did the quick math, it was $30,000 to $50,000 that we would be raising in fees as part of the flood zone process. Is that something we really, you know, on an individual basis, it's not a big deal, but at the same time, is that a service we should be providing? Or does that provide a new FTE for the office that they're understaffed, that they, you know, that Jeff had told us that they were? So, I mean, I think that's at least something that we would discuss before I mean, it's not in the big realm of the budget, it's not a big deal, but it's a big deal to the people that it affects $50 to, you know.
And especially if they could get it done within a week in that situation, rather than waiting 2 months or something along those lines.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with it might be something that we want to take a look as a group that does it make sense what we are charging for fees? And maybe $50 is not enough, or it's too much, or, you know, it's definitely something to discuss. I know he just didn't seem like he had a lot of thought where that amount came from, other than it was a place to start.
Mm-hmm. Right. So financial impact on a lot of things is what I'm hearing from the group. Good. New topics? Any other thoughts? I have a couple I want to toss to the group. One of the initiatives that came out of the previous city council just a couple of years ago is the Workforce Development Fund. It's a $500,000 appropriation over the last 2 years. I wonder if this group might want to take a little bit of oversight with that. It does live inside the Community Development Department, but do we want to see more reporting? Do we want to understand better how it's working, how it's being used, and what might be next? It seems to be a fiscal topic. I'm just tossing it out there, Councilor Erickson.
I would agree and say yes, that would be a great place for this to come. Full disclosure, I was not crazy about seeing it just swoop through on consent agenda. I did not pull it, so that's my own fault. But at the same time, I just think that it's a great opportunity for us to come in, hear what they're doing, report on it. What is the use of the public dollars, and what are we getting out of it for it? I just think it's so important that we have that accountability and transparency in the process. And this would be a great place to do it unless they want to take it to a full council. I don't know, maybe that's the better thing too.
Councilor Ruffing.
And I just add, and also how they're collaborating with the other entities in Sioux Falls and the state so that we don't overlap and we're all working together.
Right. I just, my thought with it was that instead of bringing it to full council, I mean, certainly other council members, and we have them here tonight, other councilors can be in these meetings, but it does sometimes lend itself in a committee setting to have more open conversation. And if you're on the fiscal committee, I assume that you have a little more interest in maybe the money side of things, not that the other members don't, but this is a place where we're really going to talk about money. Seems like a logical spot for that reporting to be happening. And I'm getting head nods. I'm taking that as a consensus of the group. Mr. Bixler, if in July, let's have them come so that we are talking about it prior to budget conversations for 2017.
I will have them come. The one thing that I think that they are looking for right now is direction. Do we want to continue with last year was a pilot program. Do we want to continue with that same approach? Do we want to, is there something that needs to be tweaked? And I think that they want to talk about that. So, and we thought we would wait until the new committees were formed to pursue that.
Great, let's do it. I think we're ready. This group wants to handle that too. Let's help with that direction. Let's be prepared as council members if you need to prior to that meeting. Dave, if you would include in the either in the red notes or in a separate email to council, just if you can, links to the original documents, the original applications, the proposals, not only the ones that came from the individuals that applied for the grants, but also the information that came out of council, so that this committee can be ready to have that conversation at our July meeting. That would be helpful to have that reading done ahead of time.
Okay. And just one thing I want to note is that those dollars are coming out of the general fund. And so those dollars need to, if they're to be utilized, they need to be put to work before the end of this year.
That's correct.
And we're halfway through.
Okay. Let's see how we can be helpful.
Yep.
In that way. Good. Any other things from the group? I do have one more I just kind of want to toss out, and it was sort of providential that the front page of the Argus Leader today sort of reflected some of my thought process. You all know that I'm elected from the Central District, which is some of the more interesting neighborhoods in Sioux Falls. They're wonderful older homes and affordable housing and all the things that go with that kind of neighborhood. And one of the main things that I spend my time doing as a city council member is helping citizens walk through code enforcement, not either as landlords or as renters or as homeowners living next to something that's less than desirable. And so one of the things that I have been kind of working with on the side is there is a code enforcement team in the administration that really focuses on those housing situations where there are problems. And we have looked then, I've taken kind of a work group out of that just again on the side, and we've talked about how can we make this a better situation, not only for us as neighbors, whoever we are as neighbors, or landlords, or renters, or, all those parties that are involved with sort of quality of life things that are involved when it comes to code enforcement. And to me, it's one of those things that really is a fiscal responsibility of the city at this point. There are some things that perhaps need to be changed in the ordinances. And I wonder if this group might want to hear reports from that work group as we kind of look at what's next. You know, this is not a short-term project, and it's not something that one individual is going to do by themselves, but it's something that is going to take the will of the council. And I just have been looking for what makes the most sense for that group to start airing it in public. How do we talk about code enforcement? How do we talk about it's going to be more expensive possibly? How do we do that? And it seemed like fiscal committee might be the place. So, thoughts? Got a wishy-washy on Councilor Erickson. Go ahead.
I don't know if fiscal is the best place for it. I guess at first thought I'm thinking that possibly land use would probably be the first to come to mind, just because we're talking about property rights, we're talking about property and things of that. Sure, there's an expense to it. For me, it feels right for land use, possibly even public services. I don't know. That's generally a catch-all and a very busy committee anyways. So I'm not necessarily advocating for that committee. But land use maybe seem a little better. You know, I guess I just feel like fiscal, we focus more on the dollar aspect of it, but I'm not saying I can't be convinced otherwise. That's just what comes to mind.
Other thoughts, comments? I know I'm just tossing it at you, and I'm not saying we got to decide now. I'm just looking for a place to have this conversation, and it needs to go into the public forum now.
I would, if I could,
Go ahead.
I would think any one of the three committees, other than audit, the fourth one, could handle that. And maybe you should have a conversation with the other two chairmen, see if they're interested and if they feel that it's something they want to take on. If not, it could come back here, because it is it's something that would fit in any one of the three. And but I think it's an important one to get updates on again and see how things are moving along.
Right. Councilor Starr, any comments?
No, I think it's a topic that we need to discuss. It's just a matter of where and how, and so I think it has a fiscal implication as well as, you know, land use or even public service. So.
Good. Okay. I will do that. I will talk to the other chairs, and we'll kind of keep fleshing that out. Maybe we'll talk about it in open discussion at an informational meeting as well. Any other comments, thoughts, brainstorms? We've been sitting here for about a half an hour. It's been good conversation, but anything else? Before we adjourn, then, I'm going to remind us that we do meet in July. We will have Finance Director Tracy Turbeck talk about the 25% and possibly some debt limitations, that we can have that conversation. And then we will also talk about workforce development at the July meeting. So, hearing no other comments, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you all.